Grade 5, we're still going to have a little bit of a discussion about the story of the fairy in the flower garden. I didn't read the story and I can't remember from last year what the story is about, but if I predict from the title, it will be about fairies in the flower garden and about the little girl with her doll that is sitting that in that picture, and that it may be, it seems to me that she took some pictures of a fairy she saw on a flower. But at activity 116, they talked about contextual clues. Now, what is a contextual clue? Let's see. Since this is our second language, English is our second language, sometimes you read words, like I have read the word chrysanthemum, and I had difficulty to pronounce the word, only for the fact that I'm Afrikaans speaking and not that good in English speaking. Sometimes that you don't know what the meaning of a word in a certain sentence is, but you can go and find out and try to find out what the meaning of that specific word is by reading the rest of the sentence and reading the sentences that come after that sentence, just to see what the word is about, and that we call contextual clues. So if we read in our books, at the bottom of that page, activity 160, they tell us a contextual clue refers to finding the meaning of unknown words by examining the parts of a sentence surrounding the word for clues. I can remember when I grew up, I was very fond of reading, and I went to the library and I took out some books, but since we didn't grow up with English that much, that is for today. We didn't have television, and so we didn't hear English that much. And then I tried to read the English books, but some words I couldn't pronounce, and some words I didn't know what the meaning were. And then I found out that if I read the next sentence, or the sentence again and the previous sentence, that I could figure out what that word means. Now, sometimes not exactly what it means, but you have a clue. You have a contextual clue due to the position of that word in a sentence or in a paragraph. Now, that is what contextual clues are. So, turn your page and look at number 1, and they ask you to find the words and the meaning of the following words. The word admire. So now you go back to your story of the fairies in the flower garden, and you see if you can find the word admire. But you're not allowed to look it up in a dictionary. You have to find the meaning of the word by the following words in the sentence and the next sentences to see what the meaning is. The next word is fluttered. Then camera. Now, camera is easy, you know what that is, but go back and try to find it. And the word company. And then they give you a paragraph below, and use the context of the story, what has happened before, to answer these questions. So I have 2 questions, and they have a paragraph from, I assume, from the story that they ask 2 questions about. And then you have to use your contextual clues to find the answers. All right, now we're going on to activity 117, and there they talk about the plot of a story. Now, what is the plot of a story? If you understand that very clearly, then you will have not that difficulty when you yourself write a story in your creative writing. A plot is what the story is about. It includes all the events that happens in the story. If we go back to the story that I have read to you, and you have to listen, you will remember that the flowers argued, and they argued about who were the prettiest. And then everyone has a say what he or she thinks why they are the prettiest. And then the gardener came and they tried to look at their bests, and then the garden started to pick each of them and put them into a bunch of flowers, and then it said all of them are so pretty and together they are more prettier. So that is the plot of the story. But you must go back and summarize the plot of the story about the fairies in the flower garden. Read it again and try to find out what the story is really about. Is it about the girl? Is it about the fairies? Is it about she sawing the fairies and no one believed her? I don't know. I didn't read the story. But you have to go back and find out and write 5 to 7 sentences to summarize the plot of the story. And then comment on the plot. Do you think it's a good plot? Do you think it worked out very nicely for the fairies, or whatever happened there? And they ask you 2 questions there that you can think about. Do you think the plot is strong? Do you think the story ended well? And do you think Leah did a good thing by wanting to take photos of the fairies? And why do you think this? That activity is all around the plot of the story. And if you can understand that, you will find it much easier to write your own story. Alright, so that one is all about the contextual clues and the plot of a story. And then if we continue on, we find activity 121, we see that you have to write a story. And there they talk about the plot of the story, the climax of the story. Now the climax of the story is when your plot is building up and then suddenly something happened. Right? So the story of the flowers in the garden, it builds up how they argue and how they argue and how they ask the gardener who is the more prettier or the most prettiest or whatever. And it builds up and it builds up till the gardener came and cut off the flowers and put it in a basket, and still they argue. And then the climax was when the gardener said, all of this bouquet of flowers is the most prettiest flowers that I've ever seen. So there must be a climax, there must be a theme. Your story must be about something. You can't just write loose sentences, yes. There can be characters in your story. It can be animal characters, plant characters like the flowers, or people. And then there must be a setting. And the setting is the place where the story took place, where it takes place. And what that refers to the place where the story is happening. Now, if you think about the story I've read to you, it happened in a garden. And the story of the fairies also happens in a garden. So there must be a place where it will happen, the story, and that is the setting. Now you have to write a fantasy story about magical creatures in your garden. So you can talk about fairies or a little gnomes. And your story there, they tell you how your story must how it must be. There must be 2 to 3 paragraphs. It must be creative, so use your imagination, and there must be an introductory sentence, a body, and a conclusion at the end, and there must be a title. And then the next page, they tell you how you must construct your story. It must have a brain chart, and there must be a first draft, and there must be neatly a final draft for your story. And then there's a little checklist where you can just check everything. Did you do this? Did you select appropriate content? Is there 2 to 3 paragraphs? Did I write a title? And you just can tick it off in your study guide to see if you did everything for your story. All right, so that will be the writing part of your story, as well as that contextual clues that you can complete, please.